Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Penn Vicarage on this lovely Wednesday morning. Looks like a beautiful day, a nice day for playing golf, dare I say, and looking forward to today. Thank you for your prayers yesterday. I had a wonderful day as I was licensed as the new minister in charge for 6 months of Tamworth. Quite strange. This time yesterday morning, I was leading 2 churches. Now I'm leading 6, but there we go. Looking forward to it, and everyone made me very welcome yesterday, and thank you for your prayers. And yes, it was a good day yesterday, so thank you. But today's day off. But nice to see you for our Bible talk for this morning. Friends, we are working our way through the Gospel of Matthew. So without further ado, I'm going to read you Matthew 17, verses 22 to the end of the chapter. As they were gathering in Galilee, Jesus said to them, "The Son of Man is going to be betrayed into human hands. They will kill him, and on the 3rd day he will be raised." And they were greatly distressed. When they reached Capernaum, the collectors of the temple tax came to Peter and said, "Does your teacher not pay the temple tax?" He said, "Yes, he does." And when he came home, and Jesus spoke of it, asking, "What do you think, Simon? From whom do kings of the earth take toll or tribute? From their children or from others?" When Peter said, "From others," Jesus said to him, "Then the children are free. However, so that we do not give offense to them, go to the sea, cast a hook, and take the first fish that comes up. When you open its mouth, you will find a coin. Take that and give it to them for you and me." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Okay, so we've got 2 little bits in this here. We've got this little bit at the beginning about Jesus going to death, and we've got this lovely little story about the fish hook and the temple tax. We'll start with the first bit. Jesus had, a couple of chapters ago, told his disciples that he was going to die on the cross, and that he was going to be handed over, and he was going to die. And here he repeats it again. And in fact, he does it again a couple of chapters on. So he actually says 3 times that this is going to happen. And it's a little bit different this time. The second time, it's a shorter version than the first one. You find that the disciples don't argue back in the way they did with the first one. I mean, remember, Peter argued back there. They argued back at the first one. This time they don't argue back. But what becomes clear is they're no less happy about it. That they're deeply distressed that this is going to happen. The other difference between this time he tells it and the first time is this time he's got on the 3rd day he's going to be raised again. So there's the hint of the resurrection. He mentions the resurrection as well. So for the second time now of 3, Jesus tells his disciples that he's going to die on a cross. As I say, they're no less happy. They're no happier about it, but they don't argue back this time. This time he does mention the resurrection as well. But I think it's really important we recognise that Jesus says this 3 times. 3 times, as I say, I think it's in chapter 19 as well, he says it. He tells them that he's going to die on the cross. And I suppose in a sense it it reinforces the fact that the death of Jesus wasn't an accident. It wasn't a mistake. Jesus didn't do a miscalculation. Jesus didn't do something bad. Jesus' plans didn't go astray. It was always meant to be. That the kind of Messiah Jesus was going to be, he was going to die on the cross for you and for me. It was the way it had to happen. So it wasn't, like I say, it wasn't an accident. The plans didn't go astray. They didn't get the better of him, he didn't make a miscalculation. It was always going to be this way. When the Bible does something 3 times, it's like reinforcing it. It's like holy, holy, holy. When the Bible does something 3 times, it rams it home. And here, Jesus makes it abundantly clear that he's going to die for us. And as I say, it wasn't an accident. And this is the second time he tells them. So let's register that, but also register the fact that he's also mentions here the resurrection as well. So the hope of glory is in their hearts as well. So that's the first bit. Jesus sits down with his disciples and tells them, and they've been away. Remember that he told them before, and then they'd had this transfiguration, and they'd had the incident with the poorly boy and the man and so on. And when he gets them all together again, that's when he tells them again for the second time that he's going to die. So that's the first bit. Then we've got this bizarre little story about the fish hook and the temple tax, and this is one of the strangest stories in the whole of the New Testament, I have to say. Why does Matthew mention it? I do wonder, because it's a story all about tax, and Matthew being a tax collector, I suppose that's maybe why he stuck in his brain. Who knows? But Matthew's the only one of the gospel writers that mentioned this bizarre little story. And some of the kind of in those days there was it wasn't the normal taxation that you pay to Romans, paid to the Romans. This was a tax that was paid to about the temple, to keep the temple, to keep the building going, pay all the priests and that sort of stuff. And it was equivalent to about 2 days' work, so it was a fair bit of money. It was a half a shekel or something. It was about it equated to about 2 days' work, and I think every man between 20 and 50 had to pay it. I think it was. And some of the people come up to Peter and they ask him, does your leader pay the temple tax? And it's interesting because Peter's, of course he does, of course he does. It's interesting, what becomes clear is he actually hasn't paid it yet. But Peter, I think, maybe because he's just been reminded about the fact that Jesus is going to die, maybe he's Peter's opportunity to be protective. And he's very protective with his friends. Of course he pays it, of course he pays it. When he actually, I think it's fairly clear that he certainly hasn't paid it yet. He hasn't paid it this year anyway. But anyway, so Peter kind of defends his friend Jesus, which is lovely. But then of course they have this kind of chat later, and Jesus talks about, do the sons pay or the outsiders pay in a kingdom, pay the king, and they say, well, outsiders pay, the sons don't pay. And there's an implication here, kind of the disciples don't need to pay the temple tax. But I think it's a bit more complicated than that. I'm going to this is kind of my suggestion, is that the temple was the place at the time where you met God. The temple was a place where you can go and meet with God, which is why Jesus got so angry in the temple when this filled up with market and that sort of stuff, because there wasn't room for people to meet God. And that everyone could meet God in the temple. But that Jesus, I think, knew that when he died and died on the cross and rose again, that he was going to become the new temple. That instead of meeting God in a physical building, instead we'd meet God through Jesus. And that, I think, is why he kind of allows them to pay the temple tax now, and provides for it by this coin in the fish, which is fascinating, lovely little story. At the same time, giving the impression that you don't have to pay it. I think what he's saying is, you won't have to pay it, because you won't have to pay the temple, because I am the new temple. I'm the place where you'll meet God. I will be anyway. But for now, I haven't died. I haven't rose again from the cross. I haven't rose again yet. The curtain of the temple hasn't been torn in two yet. So for now, I think you need to pay the temple tax. And I think the other reason for paying it, he clearly doesn't want to give offence as well, is he knew that he was going to give his life willingly for the world. And in a sense, it was his decision. It wasn't because he wasn't paying taxes. He wasn't put to death in the end for being a non-taxpayer, or he wasn't, like that kind of thing. He was put to death for the sins of the world. It was his decision. It had to be, and it wasn't for some crime he'd committed. So I think he implies by this story about the son not paying the king and so on. He implies that you kind of don't have to pay it, but at the same time pays it, and through the fish, because they must have been out of money. I think it's partly because he knows that one day he is going to be the new temple. That one day, after his death and resurrection, we will meet God through Jesus. He will be the new temple, if you like. And partly because he doesn't want to give offence. He doesn't want to die yet. He doesn't want to be imprisoned as a non-payer of tax. That he knew that one day he was going to die and rise again for us. But it was his decision. It happened in his time and in his way. And as we've already heard, it was meant to be. So, two things in this morning's reading. Firstly, Jesus' prediction for the second time that he's going to give his life for the world, that he's going to die for us. Okay, this time mentioned the resurrection as well. And as I say, the disciples didn't argue back this time, but they weren't any less happy about it, understandably, as they're going to lose their friend. But secondly, this lovely little story about paying the temple tax and how Jesus implies through a parable that you kind of don't have to pay it because there's this thing about being children not paying the king and so on. But on the other hand, I think Jesus knew that somehow he was going to become the new temple, that we'd meet God in him, and therefore that one day we wouldn't have to pay it. But for now, it hasn't happened yet, and partly also because he doesn't want to give offence. The time is not right. That he says, go off, put your hook in the water, pull out a fish, and in the first fish you'll find a coin in its mouth, which apparently does happen sometimes, and let that pay for him and for Jesus and for Peter. Complicated story. That's my best shot. It's just one of the most strange stories in the news. It's a lovely little story, but it's one of the oddest ones. I hope that that's my take on it. I hope that makes sense. God bless you. Have a lovely